Today I will be discussing why I think funding for law enforcement should be increased, and off the bat, I know this subject is extremely sensitive and that it seems like I'm trying to make an argument in support of police and against the police brutality protesters and the people who are trying to defund the police, but that is wrong. I too believe the current police system is flawed and needs to be reformed, and I think all the protests for justice demands are completely justified. But by defunding the police, we do not get to the root of the problem. People who advocate for defunding the police and I share the same impressions and goals. We see the distrust and corruption that is tolerated in law enforcement and want to stop seeing the amount of people who fall victim in the system that perpetrates oppression and white supremacy. But the only change with my perspective is that I have a different strategy in how to accomplish it, and I think this one is more long-term. For starters, law enforcement is content with their system and requirements that are in place currently, believing that they should not be held accountable for the actions of the few or have to take measures to ensure these conflicts do not happen again. But considering the amount of power and authority officers are granted by only completing 2 years of college, it is illogical to assume these problems will not take place. It should be looked at as not only reasonable, but it should be obvious that future law enforcers should be well versed and educated on subjects such as criminal justice ethics, criminal psychology, sociology, criminology, and civil histories. At minimum, police should have to obtain a bachelor's degree. But with that being said, their salaries would be increased according to the added requirements. As well as academically, the amount of physical training for altercations in high-pressure situations are inadequate. Most states require officers to attend some type of de-escalation training each year or every few years to prevent avoidable deaths, but Illinois does not even have a set number of these hours. Regardless, suspecting that police are prepared to orderly manage high-stakes situations by attending a little camp is irresponsible, which is why there are so many cases of cops reaching for their guns in a state of panic when it could have been avoided. That is not to say it is an excuse in any way for the victims of the police brutality. It is just to say there needs to be better training. Each week, officers should be mandated to attend simulations and trainings with skilled defense professionals, so when dangerous altercations happen, they are equipped to handle the conflict as humanely as possible and do not panic and cause more harm than justice. Similarly, being in a state of anxiety and alert at all times on their job is a major reason why police officers are more inclined to be aggressive and why this profession has the highest rate of suicide over any other type. This is why I believe social workers should be a staple in the criminal justice system. If there was a social worker there at all times, they could spot when a police's mental health is declining and not in a position to be qualified to enforce laws, or when they are in need of mental health advice or therapy. They could take actions if they witness injustices, minimizing the amount of officers who are a danger to the public. By proposing weekly de-escalation training and simulations, as well as the help of a social worker, this means adding permanent jobs that are designed to prepare and observe officers would have to happen, requiring additional funding. Lastly, there needs to be initiatives set in place to increase minorities into the police program, because the only solution to oppression is empowerment. Although all the protests and public distrust are justified, this will result in the younger generations with good intentions to be shaped to look at police systems as vile and not want to take on this profession, because very few people who are touched by the injustices of others will be okay with becoming a part of the system and being hated for it. Even more so, African Americans and minorities who have been publicly targeted may feel as though it is a betrayal to join the force, and no one can really blame them when there is not specific plans set in place to correct these problems. Hypothetically, say law enforcement does not get the funds to add changes and that they do get defunded. It is going to be primarily white people who fill the force, and they are going to be the type who are power-hungry individuals that are insensitive to these acts of injustices and society's fears and take advantage of their power and authority, which will actually drive white supremacy rather than minimize it. All in all, I hope you heard this stance not in a way that attacks mainstream concerns, but just a change in strategy for better long-term results.